We call the July 16th, 2019 California High-Speed Rail Authority Board meeting to order. Could you do the roll call, please?
Good morning. Director Schenk. Vice Chair Richards.
Here.
Director Curtin.
Here.
Director Lowenthal.
Here.
Director Camacho.
Here.
Director Miller.
Here.
Senator Bell. Assemblymember Arambula. Chairman Donza.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Could we, even though there's not a flag in the room, do a pledge of allegiance to the virtual flag? There we go.
Good job.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. We will start with public commentary, and I have two comments. Let me start with David Schwegel, please, if you would.
Are we on? Looks like we aren't. Okay, greetings, High-Speed Rail Authority Board of Directors. David Schwegel with the U.S. High-Speed Rail Association with two thoughts on how to enhance the overall project performance. First, make sure that these monthly board meetings are packed full of current and aspiring consultants as well as members of the public to partake of the wealth of information that is presented at these meetings. Specifically, I've noticed that Precision Civil Engineering and the Valines Group took very copious notes on all 142 public comment participants at the June 2015 High-Speed Rail Board meeting in Los Angeles, and they used that to formulate their outreach strategy for Merced to Sacramento with the specific goals of making sure that Elk Grove does not become another Santa Clarita and that Galt not become another Acton. ACE was also very instrumental in those efforts. As a result, whenever Governor Gavin Newsom is ready to elevate Merced to Sacramento up the food chain, he can be rest assured that we have extremely enthusiastic stakeholders between here and Merced that are ready to ride that train and ready to make that train a reality. Second, make sure that we send as many fellow Californians as possible to the Cascadia High-Speed Rail Summit this November 4th, 5th, and 6th at Microsoft headquarters to get answers to some key questions like how do we get more tech firms to really engaged in the high-speed rail project and what it means to bring Seattle and Vancouver, British Columbia much closer together from the standpoint of cross-border collaboration, and then return home and talk in terms of how bringing Silicon Valley, Sacramento, and Fresno much closer together in terms of how that's going to address California's grand challenges of housing, education, and healthcare. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwegel. We have one other public commentary from Mr. Ted Hart.
Good morning. William Warren and William Grindley asked me to hand deliver their newest paper to you, which I've already done. Mr. Mendonca, I will be addressing you today concerning the SB 1029 project update report, May 2019, that you provided to the legislature. It would appear that your staff has provided you with inaccurate and deceptive information. In your cover letter, you say in 2008, voters were told the project would cost $45 billion. Now the actual cost appears closer to $80 billion. The reference to the $45 billion is contained in the Voter Information Guide analysis by the legislative analyst, where they state, quote, the proposed system would use electric trains and connect the major metropolitan areas of San Francisco, Sacramento through the Central Valley into Los Angeles, Orange County, the Inland Empire, San Bernardino and Riverside counties, and San Diego. The authority estimated in 2006 the total cost to develop and construct the entire high-speed train system would be about $45 billion. So that part's right. The $80 billion is simply not true. It represents only phase one, San Francisco to Los Angeles, and leaves out all the rest of the metropolitan areas as described above, which is phase two. In addition, the $80 billion described in the 2018 CAHSRA business plan is for the base estimate only. The high estimate is 100 billion, and that was left out. The inaccuracy comes when you're comparing apples, the entire 45 billion statewide system, to oranges, San Francisco to Los Angeles only. The apples 2006 cost to the apples 2019 cost is about 122 billion base to 155 billion high for the entire statewide system. These cost estimates were calculated by extrapolating the numbers provided in the 2018 business plan. This is an accepted construction method of estimating approximate unknown total costs. I would appreciate being copied on your staff's corrections to your SB 1029 report to the legislature. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Were there any other comments that received? Requests for comment?
No.
Okay, thank you. Then can we move on to item 1, the June 18th board meeting minutes? We'll accept a motion to approve them if there are no corrections or additions. Is there a second?
Second.
Any other commentary? Okay, all those in favor, can you do the roll call, actually, should do this properly.
Vice Chair Richards,
Yes.
Director Curtin,
Yes.
Director Lowenthal. Yes. Director Camacho,
Yes.
Director Miller,
Yes.
Chairman Donza.
Yes. Okay,
Yep.
thank you. Could we move on to item 2, which is tab 2, to consider the approval to release a request for qualifications for track and system procurement. Please.
Vice Chair Richards. Oh, sorry.
We have a presentation first.
Apologies.
Good morning. Chairman Mendoza, Vice Chair Richards, members of the board, CEO Kelly. I'm Frank Vaca, Chief of Rail Operations for the Authority. Come before you today regarding item number 2 on the agenda, which is a request to begin the procurement process for the track and systems contract, design, build, maintain contract. I have a presentation this morning which will touch on the highlights of the request and some of the key points of this procurement. During the presentation, we'll address the type of procurement, the scope, the method of contracting in terms of maintenance period, challenges, and next steps for this procurement. Today's board action is a request to release the track and systems request for qualifications, which would initiate the procurement of a track and systems design, build, maintain contract. We come before you today because this will comply with our requirements to complete the 119 miles Madera to Poplar segment that's in our grant agreement requirement to complete the track and associated requirements for that grant by December of 2022. In addition, it aligns with the action taken by this board in May to establish a baseline of $15.6 billion and is within that baseline requirement. This procurement is divided into 6 separate segments, beginning from Bakersfield and going to San Francisco. The scope of the entire contract is the valley-to-valley segment. Each segment is associated with a notice to proceed. Therefore, we have an NTP 1 for the 119 miles just described. That's part of our grant agreement. NTP 2 would be a Poplar to Bakersfield. NTP 3, Madera to Merced. NTP 4, Gilroy to Central Valley to the Y. 5 would be San Jose to Gilroy, and NTP 6 would be any associated construction we would require between San Jose and San Francisco. I come before you today requesting the release of the RFQ, and eventually, and I will review the timeline, request authorization to proceed with NTP 1 as the final award only. The Valley segment, as I described, was Bakersfield to San Francisco. We will only proceed with segment 1 during this initial procurement, and it is consistent with the budget approved by the board. 119 miles, Madera to Poplars, the NTP1 segment. The scope of this procurement is all of the rail infrastructure required to operate a railroad. Track and systems is included, the switches, the signal system, including automatic train control and positive train control, and you may have heard that term in the press over the years. Our communication system, we have included an early earthquake detection system as part of that signal system. The station platforms, canopies, vertical circulation at our stations. This procurement does not include the actual station building, only the elements adjacent to our tracks consistent with the track and systems requirement. Those stations will come back to the board at the appropriate time to issue contracts for design, bid build on stations. It includes the overhead catenary contact system, all the high voltage substations and associated switching stations, our OCC, which is dispatching center and control center, appropriate maintenance away facilities required to maintain the property, and a 30-year maintenance responsibility for the track and systems contractor, including the civil structures being constructed in CP1 through 4. This document, this procurement, was assembled with an integrated team, including our early train operator, Network Rail Consulting as a sub to RDP, our RDP, WSP consultants, our internal contract procurement group, legal, finance, and KPMG. We've also circulated this document for comments both within the organization and out to the industry as a whole, and a peer review by a team from HS2 in England. So we've taken all those comments and incorporated those that were appropriate and ensured that we did not have any gaps. Full review. The overall program schedule, it starts with the approval today of the RFQ and would be released by the end of this month. We would expect a statement of qualifications back in September. We would come back to the board with a short list. Our goal is to shortlist to 3 qualified bidders. That would then initiate an approval from this board to proceed to the RFP stage with those 3 proposals. And then that would be about a 8 to 10 month proposal period. We'd be back to this board for approval next spring with a recommended contractor with a proposal and to request approval to award the contract and issue NTP1 by next summer. That would put this program in schedule to complete the ARRA requirements by the 12/22 deadline. The unique part of this contract, this is the first contract that the authority has issued that includes a maintenance period. This is different than the traditional civil construction contracts of design build because this includes a design build and maintain portion for 30 years. We think it's critical for our railroad and the integrity of this high-speed rail system to incorporate that maintenance period as part of this overall contract for a number of reasons. One, we're building a system. We're not building the track or the signals or the catenary, but we're building projects that work together and have to be integrated to function as a system, and that's critical at high-speed railroad operations. So it ensures the mutual capability and functionality of all of the elements of a high-speed rail system. It includes the requirement for modern, state-of-the-art signaling system, ATC, which is automatic train control, as well as earthquake detection. The other key element here is that it ensures that we focus on the best benefits for the authority, long life cycle costs. We want to avoid the savings of short-term capital costs at the expense of long-term maintenance costs. This 30-year requirement, combined with the design build, ensures that the life cycle component costs are the added value, best value for the authority long-term, and that's a key element. It also ensures that the risk allocation goes to the party that is best suited to address it, and that is the design builders and the maintainers, rather than the authority itself. It balances, of course, as I stated, the capital cost versus whole systems life cycle, and ensures a contractor and a joint venture that is with us operationally and construction-wise for the next 30 years. They have skin in the game, and they have a reason to do the best for themselves and us. Some of the challenges in this procurement is, one, obviously getting access, completing the CP 1 through 4 at the earliest possible time and getting our contractor access to start construction. We've developed a number of strategies to assist in that. We think it's been addressed, but will be something we'll have to manage long term. Additionally, as we all know, the December 2022 deadline is a challenge, and again, we'll have to manage that closely, but we believe that it's been addressed in this procurement process and in the time frame. This reiterates the schedule that I reviewed before in terms of the RFQ starts the procurement process. That's about almost a year-long process, and this is just the first step. I will reemphasize that we will be back to the board for each notice to proceed. So this will not allow authority and not allow staff to award this contract and move beyond NTP1 without coming back to the board for your approval. Another element which will be addressed in coming up board meetings in the next few months is a process to cite and locate all of the facilities required both for the tracking systems and our rolling stock procurement, which would include the HMF, heavy maintenance facility, the dispatch center, the OCC as we call it, and the maintenance facilities for this contractor. So we'll be back to the board in the next few months for that process. And at this time, I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have on it.
Thank you, Frank. Open up to questions or comments from the board. Ernie?
Frank, thank you. That's a very comprehensive report. Does the R agreement or grant suggest that we do every one of the elements that you're talking about?
It requires a track and the ability to operate trains. So the RFP is structured to have a milestone, which is track and a rudimentary signal system to be able to operate minimal operation of trains. So the ARA grant and the RFP are aligned in that first milestone is not a full catenary signal system.
The ARA grant does not suggest that we do
Catenary.
an overhead catenary system.
No, it does not.
Nor does it all of the other whistles and bells.
That's correct.
I mean, in a perfect world, I think that's exactly what we want.
Right.
But if we're asking, or if we're saying that the firms, consortiums, whichever is going to build this 119-mile system, and will have the responsibility for maintenance for the next 30 years, will that not give them a leg up on the rest of our system? I know that we are discussing the issue of conflicts of interest, and some of those conflicts are because of perhaps some of the design issues that a firm may have a leg up on the other firms by knowing more than anyone else. So if we award this 119 miles, we are in a sense going to award that same, more than likely, if they're doing a good job, award the rest of the system to that same.
Actually, this contract envisions that the successful bidder is guaranteed Bakersfield to San Francisco, and the 6 incremental steps if we proceed beyond NTP1.
Well,
And that we did that intentionally because we can't have different systems, different designs, different maintenance requirements, different training, different inventory from segment to segment. The consistency of building and maintaining this as a system uniformly is for the best long-term benefit of the operation for the state.
Your last point, may I ask one other question? Your last point brings up something. The last board meeting and the meeting before that, we asked for a side-by-side comparison of all the segments. You just made a statement that we're going to build Bakersfield to San Francisco. That's not necessarily true until we do a side-by-side. So how does the side-by-side comparison interfere with this schedule?
Yeah, my comment was not made in terms of which priority comes first, but the fact that ultimately our requirement for Prop 21 is to build a segment from Los Angeles to San Francisco. Ultimately, whether NTP2 comes before some other segment, that's irrelevant. Eventually, we will have to build Bakersfield to San Francisco. The side-by-side comparison is due, the qualitative analysis is due to this board in September, and we're on target to meet that.
So going back to the, I guess the one point is that the successful bidders will in fact probably be the system-wide constructor for our system.
For at least V to V, yes. Minimum B to B.
The issue of earthquake warning system, I mean, since we just had an occurrence, I mean, it's obviously very, very pertinent. In one of my visits to Japan, rode the system, and their geography is very similar to ours, where they have a range of mountains that seems to have a lot of movement, and it's very similar to California. And their system is probably very unique in as much as that they shut down the entire system when they assume there's going to be an earthquake or feel that. But they wanted it to provide only the rolling stock and track and systems. So will that mean that they will not be, or they'll be prevented from bidding this?
No, they are not the Japanese. In fact, we have interest from Hitachi as part of the request, review of the RFP comments, so they have been engaged with us. However, our system, earthquake detection system, will be designed along the same lines as the Japanese and also the Taiwanese high-speed rail. There's a little difference in terms of how it's controlled, whether it's controlled by the catenary or by the signal system, but essentially the sensors and the system is very much akin to both of those Asian systems.
When we talk best value, that is always very subjective. Is there an objective way that we're going to limit?
The evaluation of that criteria is very key to our final evaluation on the RFP. The final scoring numbers and of those individual elements will be presented when we come to ask to go to the RFP stage. However, yes, we will be looking at what the proposed maintenance costs versus capital replacement costs during the course of the 30 years and looking for RAMs, reliability, accessibility, safety, and maintenance targets against capital costs. So all those relationships in terms of costs will be part of the evaluation process for the final RFP and the final award of the successful bidder.
So you'll come back to us for each section?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we'll be back to you, and we can review the actual evaluation criteria for the RFP at that time.
Chairman, thank you for indulging.
Thank you. Good questions. Any other questions? Bonnie?
I just want a better understanding of what the limitations are in terms of contractors that can apply.
There has been a recent request by some of the contractors that we had to evaluate in terms of conflict. Right now, our legal team has conflicted out anyone associated with the CP1 through 4 contractors, anyone that's on those JV teams, and anyone that's on our PCM teams of CP1 through 4 would be conflicted out because they have superior knowledge of some elements that could influence the bids. If there's any other subcontractors, they would have to be addressed on a case-by-case basis through our legal department. But right now, the primary contractors conflicted are JVs in CP1 through 4 and the PCMs in 1 through 4.
How quickly are we getting back to them about the conflict?
Anyone that's submitted, the legal team gets back to them very quickly. As far as I know, Tom, do you have any comments on that? I mean, I think they've addressed that.
We do respond promptly, and sometimes there's an engagement back and forth to obtain more information from the teams, so we understand what the structure of the organization is, so we can do the proper evaluation. And so we do have those discussions as well, but we understand the urgency of getting these answers to them because the procurement is coming up, so we are prompt in that.
And we've determined that the conflict are issues raised by the federal acquisition regulation as opposed to policy.
Yes, yes, and there are a grant agreement requirements that require us to look at these conflict issues, and the principles are found in both state and federal law and case law regarding competition, and so we're using all that. We've used outside counsel to assist us as well in the evaluations.
Just an added observation here, Mr. Camacho, is that since the last board hearing and the delay in the action on this, there's been industry engagement back and forth with our staff to go through these issues in more detail and get a better understanding of where this conflict is.
I think it's really important that we don't jump into something that we regret later. I think we're part of the lessons learned from the past.
Yeah, and if I might add, if please, we have done this engagement with some of the team members who were at the subcontractor levels. We were able to establish some criteria to allow them to participate by the placement of ethical walls between groups within their companies. So we have really looked for creative ways, which is allowed under our organizational conflict of interest policy, to put those mechanisms in place to allow more competition, because we do want competition.
So it's more the primaries that are unable to participate than the
Right.
subs?
That's been the determination, is the design builders and the PCMs at this point, because their involvement would, they have non-public information that others wouldn't have. Those are the basic principles. And then they also give us advice and are privy to, our positions on many issues. And that created, the problem with having them to perform this track and systems procurement as well.
Okay, please. Yeah.
Speaking as a layman here, lay person, I'm a little baffled by it, but it's not really germane to the RFQ conversation. But I think one of my very first votes was for a $700 million award, and in the process of determining the eligible contractors or contractors, there was 30 points out of 200 awarded for knowledge of the project. Now, I know this is a different situation and there's more specifics to it, but it sounds on the face of it like we're excluding people who have knowledge of the project, which is what we've been trying to get more and more of, people who know how to build high-speed rail. And, on the basis of having non-public information, I find that interesting. Is it possible that that non-public information could be made public so that nobody walks in the door with information that other people don't have, unless there's some kind of proprietary concern about that non-public information, in which case it puts the people who don't have it at a disadvantage in terms of constructing this project. And I didn't quite get the other part of it, but I did read the original letter, which again struck me as odd, that they may have inside information that will change the way they perform the job they're doing now based on the contract that they'd be pursuing in the future, which sounds pretty fraudulent, actually, to me, and could be looked upon in a different way than just saying, well, you're just not going to be allowed to bid. So we have to move forward on this measure, regardless of the conflict of interest perspective that we end up with or rules that we end up with. But I just sort of want to emphasize that losing the experience of those who are building our project now on the grounds that that's going to give them a heads up on the next part of the project actually sounds counterintuitive to me. So I'm hoping what you do is the very best possible way is to allow the most competent contractors to actually perform the bid. Because if you're basically telling the prime contractors on this project, you can't bid on the next portion of the project, I'd be reluctant to bid on the next portion of the project as a prime contractor.
It's worth noting they'll certainly be eligible for future construction elements of the contract, of the project, rather.
Okay, so there's a.
Not track and systems per
There's a
se, but
specificity to track and systems then, that is a
Has a
is
relationship with
requiring this
construction contract.
strict conflict of interest. Somehow that needs to be made a little more clear. Maybe the people who know how to do this stuff understand it, but, you know, your average person who will be involved in some of the decision-making, it's hard to comprehend. So clarification, but also with the emphasis that rather than try to say you might misperform, say if you do misperform, you know, not only will you be not invited to participate in the future, you will go after you legally speaking. So that's one way to sort of address it. But that's just a concern I have. But again, this is not, to me, relevant, no disrespect to this particular vote we're looking at, because that's a mission-critical vote, and, you know, we'll leave it at that. When we go further, I'll make some comments on that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, one last thing. Many of these, at least from the industry forums that I've attended, many of these firms have formed consortiums going back 2 years, 2.5, 3 years, because of their specialty. So we were probably a little late in notifying them, I mean, within 30, 45 days, that they're precluded, which then breaks up their team. And so many of the specialty firms are now, which are critical to the entire component, are left out of this game. So it's, perhaps we could have done a better job in that area.
Okay. Tom, or
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Vaca, I just want to make sure I understand with regards to the NTP1, which will be for the 119 miles that is the subject of the ARA grant.
Yep.
So when, and again, this is downstream because this is all going to come with the RFP, not the RFQ. So I really don't have any issues at all with the RFQ as far as I am aware. But with regards to the NTP1, will NTP1 be addressed to ensure that the improvements that are required by the grant are what are addressed in NTP1?
Yes, the first milestone deliverable for NTP1 is the ARA requirements of the 119 miles.
Okay, and you started by addressing what is necessary to do that. Can you just be clear again, what is it that in order to comply with our federal grant, what work has to be done with regards to track?
We need a track on the 119 miles. We need a rudimentary signal system and communication system, so any train can operate on that track.
Okay, and is that what we're going to do with NTP1 then?
That is the first milestone in NTP1, first deliverable.
Okay. So then at some later date, there will be additional work necessary in NTP1 to bring it up to the standards for high-speed rail.
One of the benefits of combining this all in the NTP1 is because the design for the entire final product can be done concurrently and minimize throwaway costs or lost costs. And maybe efficiencies can be had to actually put in the final product concurrently with the track as it progresses. So we are doing everything we can to eliminate any throwaways and maybe build it on an accelerated basis. But at the end of the day, the final milestone deliverable must meet the ARA requirements.
But those additional decisions with regards to NTP1 will be decisions or suggestions that you all will be discussing whether, and I assume would likely end up coming to the board. So NTP1 to begin with will just meet the requirements of the ARA grant.
NTP1 is the final product. There's a first milestone in NTP1 that meets the ARA grant.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, I think I understand that. The other things that we may need to do to upgrade it, we'll be talking about. It may be they may be suggested to be designed initially, but they may not be put in initially.
Exactly.
That'll come to the board at some point.
Yes.
Okay, and you've pointed out, made clear that the release of NTP1 will be clear that that's all we're doing at the outset.
Yes.
I just had the life cycle at 30 years. Is Is that the life cycle? Is that the industry standard?
No, the maintenance contract is picked on a 30-year basis, but each element has a different life cycle. So the bridges are 100 years, the rail is about 50 years, but the signal system is about 15. So it's done on an element-by-element basis and across the requirements.
Okay, that's what I was getting at. So what was the thinking that went into the 30-year agreement, the life of the maintenance agreement at 30 years?
So essentially, there's two broad areas of assets. The more electronic-based assets are about 15 years. Mm-hmm. So you get one complete rebuild in that 30-year period. The second is the fact that part of the requirements is that when the infrastructure is handed back to the authority after the 30 years, that there be 10 years of life left in that asset to give us an opportunity then to recapitalize. So that was that 30-year period is also consistent with the rolling stock 30-year period, because rolling stock essentially has about a 30-year life with a 15-year midlife rebuild. So if the proposers would prefer to have a longer maintenance period because of recovery on capital in order to improve that life cycle, we would be open to it, and the RFP is written accordingly.
Okay, thank you. Tom, if I could just ask you a question then. So with regards to what the policy is of this board today based upon its action, and probably reflecting on the 2018 business plan, it's my understanding that the current position of this board by action is the operating segment that we have approved as a board is valley to valley. Is that correct?
Yes, the initial operating section for purposes of meeting the subsidy requirement in Prop 1A. That's what we had determined through ridership revenue forecasts, is you'd have to travel from Bakersfield to San Jose in order for the ridership revenue ticket sales to pay for maintenance and operation if we were to be the operator.
Right.
Yes.
But notwithstanding all of that, I mean, that's currently our policy. So as Director Camacho and I and the rest of the board members are aware, we've got some reports and studies being done right now, but currently, without a change in direction, that is the direction that the board has taken with regards to, as you point out, the first operating segment. Okay. I think that's all I've got, Mr. Chairman.
And the answer was yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Well, I got a couple of questions regarding the proposal. So two things struck me, Frank. One was the skin in the game. I didn't quite get that reference. I've been hearing it for a very long time and have felt that we've missed the opportunity to do that in some occasions. Can you clarify what you're saying?
Sure. The issue is that this proposal will provide us a bid that includes both the capital, the design, the construction, the capital input, and the maintenance for those 30 years. It is incumbent upon the successful bidder to take into consideration that they must minimize the long-term 30-year cost, because it's going to cost them. They have a fixed bid on the maintenance, and therefore to ensure that they have the best capital construction to minimize their long-term maintenance and reduce our life cycle costs is in their best interest financially.
So they have a fixed bid for all portions of it, or just the maintenance portion of it?
Well, it's a best value. So it's not, they're not separated.
So
it's a best value.
The original concept, as I understood it, and have been arguing, not just at this forum, but everywhere I can, that we need to find a way to get the private sector to pony up with a few dollars, because they have most of the money out there, or maybe not all of it, but a lot of it. And that usually means some sort of investment at risk. So where's the risk factor on this that you're talking about?
They have bid the maintenance costs. I mean, they don't have, they're at risk against their proposal. I mean, like every other contractor, they're at risk against their fixed price proposal.
And if they don't?
We have the same remedies you would have in the design build contracts.
There's no coming back and saying, we have some change order issues here, we have contingency plans. This is what happens in every particular contract we've had, because there hasn't been that risk element associated with it. And this was the discussion in the early train operator.
And there's still, ultimately, the authority's business plan and long-term goals is to have a concessionaire where that risk is out front and is provided to us.
That's done, right? More or less.
Once no, this is not a concession.
Right.
And that once the business plan articulates that once ramp-up has been completed on our operation and we have a stable operation, then we would envision that we go out for a concessionaire that then takes responsibility for the entire operation.
That does bring me back to the ETO, because we really had a pretty, well, at least I remember it, the premise here that there was going to be some private money at risk for the ramp-up portion of it. The initial stage would be a cost, time, and material question, and then there would be a ramp-up phase. This was assuming we were going to get a train up and running, and then there would be a period after it became stabilized to at least make the amount of money that was at risk. And so now we have a functioning system bringing in some funds, and then we would probably go out at that point to an open bid. Is that similar?
That's exactly the process we're following.
Okay, but there's no investment in the front end.
There's no investment until you get to the concessionaire agreement, which is about...
Through the stabilization portion of it?
After it's stabilized. Right now, the ETO's contract is broken into two phases. Phase one is basically a consulting phase, which we're going through today. And then we have to negotiate the second phase, which would be the operation and the term of that operation, how long they would participate as that operator, because at the end of that second phase, at that point, we'd go out with the concessionaire.
Right. So when you renegotiate that, since we're using the early operator, is there then the opportunity to put money at risk? Or I don't understand how that works. Do we subsidize that portion of it until it...
Well, no, we don't subsidize anything. Once we go into operation, it pays for itself.
Right.
But
once we go into operation, but there's a ramp-up phase, whichever...
Well, there's a ramp-up, but once the ramp-up phase is completed, then the operation will pay for itself in terms of our O&M costs. However, to extract capital dollars from this operation long-term, you then need to let a concession where there's dollars returned to the authority for that benefit of long-term operation.
All right, well, I'm still a little confused by that, to be honest, because in that last early train operator, we did not emphasize anybody investing any capital in the process, which for me is what gets the focuses the mind. It's kind of like a hanging. You know, meeting your requirements of your bid is one thing, but having a couple $100 million at risk is another thing. And we never really have come to grips with that. So that, I'm still a little concerned about the skin in the game question. And it really is sort of a longer-term vision than the FRA requirements here, which is one of my main concerns. The other thing I heard was the uniformity issue, which to me, you know, again, a simplification of it would makes a lot of sense when it comes to the train, you know, the electrification and all of the safety systems associated with running the train. But we're just not really there because we've already concluded that we're using a building block approach to this. So how do you, what does the uniformity mean in terms of the peninsula electrification, which I believe is moving forward to some degree without us? I assume, and I could be wrong on this, that Caltrain is doing their own electrification process that we will connect to at some point or be a part of.
So the electrification on Caltrain, we are ensuring that it's interoperable for us. We are with Caltrain side by side, ensuring that what they build meets the function that they require and meets the functions that we require for our operation. And that is, you know, ultimately we are part of their management team in terms of ensuring that technical solution is appropriate. Between San Jose and Bakersfield, that is our dedicated right-of-way, and that is the prime reason to ensure that the design that's done in any one section is the same for those other sections.
Okay, so the uniformity you're talking about is from San Jose to Bakersfield?
Correct.
Because then that would exclude the electrification in Southern California as well, which may proceed prior to
That's true. We would just ensure interoperability and the ability of our system, our trains, and our requirements for our passengers are met in that area. And that's true in both splendid sections.
Okay, well, that makes a little more sense to me than to have the same team do that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's actually mission critical since we have to do it to connect to the bookends.
Yeah, the bookend,
non-uniform way.
The bookends is you know, at slower speeds, at the 110 mile an hour speeds. Our due diligence is to ensure interoperability in those sections.
Okay, now, I know that from, say, Palmdale to Southern California would be a slower speed. Would
No.
Bakersfield to Palmdale be a slower speed?
Bakersfield to Burbank is at 220 miles an hour, only from
There are-
Burbank.
There are uniformity and
Yes.
interconnection.
All the way to
issues there.
Burbank.
All right.
Only Burbank to Anaheim would be a shared corridor, as is San Jose to San Francisco.
So this would not be, this contract does not go down there?
No, it does not. It stops at
So we
Bakersfield
would
at
have to
this point.
solve that
Yes,
connectivity problem at least in one place.
yes, interface, yes.
Okay, so that leads me to know that, I mean, if we have to do it in one place, we probably are capable of doing it in another place.
It's doable.
Yeah. Okay, those are two of the questions that were not clear to me. Right now, that's it for, unless we,
Just want to ask Board Member Miller, since I can't see you, did you have any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Is it a good time for me to ask
Yes,
those now?
please. Please, go ahead.
Thanks for the presentation. I have a question on this 30-year maintenance. Is that a requirement of our contract?
Yes, the RFP, the RFP will be a
Yeah.
design, build, and maintain.
So is this maintenance obligation that they're responding to contingent upon operations? An operational system, that's what I mean?
Well, yes, I mean, it's contingent upon the fact that, well, the state will own these assets, and we will have to maintain them regardless of which type of operation eventually operates on them. I mean, our plan is, of course, high-speed rail as per our Prop 1A, but at the end of the day, we'll have an infrastructure that's built and will have to be maintained.
Right, but you're asking for them to give you a plan now that would last for 30 years. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, and I think I asked at the last board meeting, I mean, that's a fairly long term, and we don't know yet. I mean, this would not come into play unless we have an operational system. So do you renegotiate at some point, or do you leave yourself some flexibility in case that's necessary
Okay, well, the
within
maintenance...
the next, say, 5 years
Right.
of construction?
I understand what you're saying. The maintenance proposal will include fixed cost maintenance requirements such as inspections. Regardless of whether you run one train or 100 trains, you have to inspect highway bridges, you have to inspect our railroad bridges, you have to meet federal requirements. So there's a fixed portion of the maintenance expenses. Then you have a variable portion, which is really related to the number of trains you operate, and the number of people that open and close the door, or the number of how you use that infrastructure. And that's accounted for in the proposal, both the fixed and variable costs based on operations, and there'll be a scale based on when you run 20 trains, or whether you run 50 trains or 100 trains, or there's 100,000 people or 1 million people. So that scale addresses that variability based on service. It also addresses other variables that might come into play in terms of the maintenance cycle. Time. There's escalation requirements that if, as we build NTP1, it may, obviously that 30-year maintenance cycle starts earlier than NTP6. There's a scale in terms of indices for escalation that can be applied in order to address the fact that the bid was placed several years ahead of when the operation actually took place. And similarly with the construction. Any delay in construction for NTP 2 through 6 is addressed through a table of values and schedule of values and indices to escalation. So it's all addressed as part of the RFP. And we can review that with you if you like.
Okay. Well, I think my question goes along the line of, I think, what Director Curtin and Camacho were getting at, which is this maintenance issue is a flexibility so that you can go back in to renegotiate when something comes up that we're maybe not aware of today, once you get to construction and cars and an actual system.
We will have visibility of all those costs as part of the proposal, so that if we do need to go back and talk, we will have those divided out so they'll be visible for negotiations.
But the
Okay, and then-
30 years is not part.
Sorry.
Is not part of our grant. The
No.
30 years is a number that industry has come up with.
Yes.
So
Technically,
so
the ARA
Nancy,
grant-
to answer your question, it could be 5 years, 10 years, or whatever. But this is, as he put it, to get the skin in the game, so they're committed for 30 years. So it is an arbitrary number.
Except that the ARA grant requires.
Got it.
The ARA grant actually requires 20 years. Otherwise,
do
you have to pay.
require.
If you do not maintain the infrastructure for 20 years, you have to repay the grant.
Okay. I mean, I get the 20 years, so that makes sense to me. Thank you for that. I think that's an important point. The second thing, the last question I have really on this is the issue of replacement. Are you requiring reserves, or are you letting them respond to you about how they plan on replacement schedules and how they're going to bank funds or have a capital reserve to replace things
Yes.
as they need replacement?
They will identify the life cycle requirements for each of the components. Those that are within their realm, within their maintenance contract, they will do. But finance has determined that we would hold the recapitalization. That was a decision made at the authority to take that out of that contract.
Oh, so we're paying for replacement of capital assets?
I would, yes, the last I remember, and I can get back to you to double check that, but I believe we will be having that fund separately.
Okay, well, it's important to identify what is a capital asset, right, and what we're expecting them to replace and what we're replacing.
Absolutely. We'll make sure that that's
Okay.
addressed when we come back with the RFP. We'll make that a clear part of that presentation.
Brian, does
And will you let the board know what it is that
Yes.
what that is?
Absolutely.
Okay.
does the updated business plan contemplate the cost of a 30-year maintenance plan?
It does, but it doesn't differentiate between what capital assets are in that maintenance plan. To my remembrance, I could be wrong.
I think that's right. Frank, do you have a better sense of that than I might? On this?
Say that again. Can you ask the question?
I mean, does the updated business plan contemplate the cost for a 30-year business plan versus the 20-year? Or maintenance plan,
Our O&M model, which is part of our business plan and is updated at every business plan, includes what the operations and maintenance costs would be for the operation. Those costs must be recovered as part of the operation and not as part of our capital costs or our finances at this point. So and then when we do the revenue and ridership models with our service plans, those costs must be recovered under those operations and revenue modeling done. So it is accounted for and is part of the analysis for the operations to ensure Prop 1A compliance.
Does the track system contractor bear the risk of sufficiency of the quality of construction of the CPMs?
The track and systems contractor will be provided with our design criteria manual and the design basis for the civil projects. It will also be provided with all of the objective evidence that the CP 1 through 4 have met our requirements and that what is constructed has been inspected and meets those requirements. They will be given samples of our doors application, which lists all of the requirements, lists all of the closed loop on those requirements so that they know what they are actually taking over. So it is part of that objective evidence that's required for the certification of the system. They actually take that, and they're required to design their system to meet our design requirements and what they're accepting from the civils. It's a complicated interface, but all the information's there for them.
Thank you.
Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All these questions certainly raise other things to be thinking about, and I think that those things, many of those things are what you're going to have to be dealing with at the RFP level.
Yeah. Yes.
So, but things that come to mind are you will have had an RFQ, you will have selected, that will be based upon where they think things are going.
Yes.
When you get to the RFP, will there, let's say, for instance, clearly things will become more clear as to what the direction is that we're headed. What if that's inconsistent with this NTP 1 through 6? Or what happens if we only end up doing NTP 1? if we ended up doing that, I mean, how would you foresee breaking off a maintenance agreement for 30 years on something that's less than what is contemplated here? Because let's say that there is some sort of inaction and we end up going in a different direction.
The proposal will have the maintenance associated with each section. So if you have to, if it's only NTP1, you know what the associated maintenance is for that section. And as you build a system as you release each NTP. So again, the RFP will be structured so that all that information will be visible, transparent, and be able to address based on if there are changes, critical changes. And consistent with all of our contracts, there's obviously legal address any termination or any changes in the contract, which is consistent with state law and how we let all our contracts.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I guess just to the council again, so Tom, at least for the process we're going through right now in soliciting the RFQs and through that process, though, as I understand it, other than, we're not really assuming any additional liability. I mean, it's when we get to the RFP that we've got to be very careful in what we're going out to potential contractors in what we're asking them to do.
Correct, because this is just a qualification stage.
Yeah.
So
So clearly, Frank, that's where, I mean, this
Yep.
has got to be massively well thought out, and it's already becoming pretty complex, and we haven't even started. Yeah. Say again, Brian? Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, any other questions from board members? I have one for you, which I know is difficult to be precise on, but my assumption is based on the industry outreach that you feel that the way the RFQ is structured, that you will have sufficient quantity and quality of bidders to make sure we do have a competitive environment for those who are choosing to pursue it?
We have had interest from a number of parties that are forming teams and that have expressed interest, have asked questions, have come to 2 sessions, and yes, I do believe that we have a number of interested parties that will, more than the shortlisted requirement.
Okay.
What is the minimum?
That may be a decision that
I
the
just-
board will have to make. I believe 2 is the minimum. We'd rather have 3 and shortlist of 3.
Would we reevaluate what we're doing relative to this procurement or on the RFQ if in fact we only have 1 or 2?
We need to look at it, but I think it would have significant consequences on our long-term business plan and our approach. We would have to relook at how we're doing business, how we've planned this program from the start.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Danny, go ahead.
So this raises another issue that I've been thinking about. Since you were talking about the skin in the game, this RFQ, the people who bid on this RFQ will be building the risk factor into their contract proposal. That's just the nature of the beast.
That's like as every civil contractor does in every tracking systems. And I mean, absolutely.
I understand that.
As part of
And one way to look at that is, if they're willing to invest, and the other way is the amount their contract's going to be for, or their proposal. And then they take a risk with other proposers. But the problem I have is, to me, the mission critical issue here, and what we need to approve and move on today, is meeting the FRA requirement for the 119-mile track issue. And I'm ready to go on that, almost regardless of the conversation, because I know it's mission critical and time critical. But we may be sort of guaranteeing higher proposals than we might have gotten if we somehow managed to just go out there for the 119 base track and system that's required. So I want to keep that in mind. If we have too big a vision on this RFQ, we may end up getting a more bloated as opposed to a tighter bid on that mission critical portion of the job.
And to that, I would just suggest that we need to then The other side of that coin is then the authority starts taking on significant additional risk in terms of interfaces, in terms of design requirements.
understand that.
So there's a significant trade-off
And
there.
and I do get that, and I fully appreciate, the motivation
Yeah.
for thinking this through in a logical way.
Right.
I'm not sure, where that logic actually holds for this specific problem.
Understand.
Yeah. And if I don't have any more questions, but I do want to just comment on one more thing when we're done.
Okay. Before we ask for motion, Nancy Miller, did you have any other questions?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Nancy, have a pint for me, would you?
Yeah, well, I'm planning on it as soon as, I'll have 3 for you, Danny.
Yeah, we hear that Dublin accent.
I'll move to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any other comments? Right. Call the roll,
No,
please.
I do.
Oh, you do have a
I'm
comment.
sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I do want to make sure, because I've mentioned this before, and I've actually testified in front of a assembly committee, which was not my favorite thing to do, but I was reading through the peer review stuff before I came over here, and there's still this question out there that we need to address, but not in this particular motion. I'm for this motion, I'm going to vote for it, but I want to be known that we still have to address is the question where to go from here. The peer review group laid out a series of options. I'm not sure that's all the options, and they recognize that there could be more or better options. But the basic line there was that we're putting the cart before the horse, and it's not necessarily a critique of the High-Speed Rail Authority. It's just the way this particular project was proposed in the first place, and it's really hard to have the vision that Frank was talking about when it's really unclear how we're going to pay for that and get there. I mean, that's the problem we're facing now. And part of what they said, and I have to agree because they said it better than I could do it, but was that we have to take what we're doing, and this would be incumbent on the administration and the legislature as well as this authority, to put what we're doing in the context of the overall rail transportation system in California. And when I was testifying, I said it in a slightly different way, but the goal of doing what you're talking about is clearly what we all want, but how do we do it, and what's the best way to proceed from here for what's best for California, I think is still at issue, at least for me. And I certainly do not want to hold up the proposal that we have in front of us, but I want to make sure that we do our best to reach out to what will be our partners and get more potentially interesting concepts of how we could best fulfill the needs of our partners as well as while we build out this rail system. It's clear we're not going to get this thing done in one straight shot like it would have been beautiful if the funding was there. And I fully appreciate looking at it in a larger way for the long-term efficiencies, et cetera. But I think we do have a few things that we have to do that are going to undermine that vision ever so slightly, hopefully ever so slightly. And I think we're still open for conversation on that. But having said that, I'm for this particular motion because this is the mission-critical portion of what we're doing for the time being.
Okay. Thank you. Can you call the roll, please?
Vice Chair Richards,
Yes.
Director Curtin,
Yes.
Director Lowenthal,
Yes.
Director Camacho,
Yes.
Director Miller,
Yes.
Chairman Donza.
Yes. Okay. Thank you all, and thank you, Frank, for answering all those questions. We look forward to the next stage as well.
That was easy, Frank.
Okay, Nancy, before we go on to the next item, there are no public audience at your site that would like to comment because I didn't have a mechanism to connect their cards. Nancy, does anyone want to comment?
Yes. There are no public members here to comment.
Okay, thank you.
O'Toole would like to say something.
We'll save that for the pub afterwards over a pint of Guinness.
Did she just look around the bar and say,
That's right.
this could be interesting?
Okay, so, thank you. We now move on to item 3, and as much as we have enjoyed having this portion in the last several meetings delivered by a ventriloquist. It's delightful to be able to hear Mr. Kelly's voice.
Where's
So,
Barbara?
Barbara, you sure you don't want to do this again just for old time's sake? Or?
And she did a real good job for you.
Yes, she did.
Okay. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman and members, thank you. Brian Kelly, CEO for High Speed Rail. This is the portion of the program where I give you the CEO report, which sort of encapsulates things that we're working on at the staff level, and things we'll be coming back to all of you very, very shortly on. Before I get into that list, I do want to take a point of personal privilege, if I could. And I just want to say thank you, both to this board, to my staff and colleagues, and actually to members of the public as well, who have expressed to me a lot of support and concern during my health care challenges of the last 9 months. I was without a voice for 6 months, which made my wife incredibly happy. But I'm pleased to have a voice back, and just want to say, really from the bottom of my heart, thank you to all of you for the concern and support over these last several months. And I'm sure you'll get sick of this voice in short order. So thanks again. There are 3 things that I'm looking to cover today. One is work that we've done with our website that really every state agency has had to do recently. I wanted to cover that with the board and make sure you understand where we are and what we're doing in that area. Secondly, I wanted to go through a couple of program or project progress points for you, things that we're working on. We'll be coming back to the board on in September. And then lastly, I want to recognize some employees who have been with us for a while and then who have moved on to other things and recognize their fine work. So let me do that. But first, on the website issue, pursuant to state law, the authority, like all state agencies, is required to certify by July 1st that our website and the documents contained thereon are compliant with the Americans with Disability Act, the ADA. And I'm pleased to report that I made such a certification on that date with reference to our website. As we previewed for you last month with new animations, the authority has launched a new website. The site was unveiled on June 28th, has a new look and feel, improved navigation, and is more mobile friendly for folks who access it with things like or cell phone devices and iPads and whatnot. As I also noted, our website is now ADA compliant, which again, under the law, I had to certify to by July 1st. To make this so, authority staff went through an extensive process of analyzing website data and worked with both our umbrella agency, California State Transportation Agency, and the governor's office to ensure that all mandated and highly used documents were remediated, a process to make them ADA compliant, and reposted to the website. Documents that were removed have been archived and can be requested by the public. Our website includes documents that generally fall into 3 of the following categories. The documents are legally required to be posted, the documents are less than 3 years old, or the documents highlight major decisions or help us tell the story of the program and help educate the public about this project. On the site, we currently have all board materials for 2018-19 and all board resolutions going back to 2009. The transparency and accountability page includes a summary of 387 out of the 412 CP change orders to date, with the remainder being incorporated within a week. Other important documents, such as our federal grant documentation and important environmental decisions, remain accessible on the site. We're not done with this effort. We are still remediating additional documents that will be on our website once that process is completed. And then lastly, we are here to help the public find documents that they're looking for if they can't find them on the website. And I note that the footer of every web page says the following: if you're looking for a particular document not located on the California High-Speed Rail Authority website, you may make a request for the document under the Public Records Act, through the Public Records Act. We provide a link to that. Or if you have any questions about the website or its content, please contact the authority at info@hsr.ca.gov, and staff is on hand to respond to requests for that information. So again, this is a process that every state agency in California has undergone, and we've done that work as well. And as I said, I was pleased to certify that by July 1st, our website was indeed ADA compliant. On to more direct issues relative to the project and the program itself. First, I want to thank the board. We had a very good conversation about the RFQ, and to me, this is another example of an important and significant step that this board is taking to move forward on the project, and I thank the board for that action. It's also worth noting, and I think the conversation got to this, there's other important work progressing that it's important you all know is underway. Staff is working on the 2 reports requested respectively by the board and the F&A committee in May of 2019. One, of course, is the Central Valley business case. Our financial advisor, KPMG, will write the business case report on the Merced to Bakersfield Early Interim Service Plan that was outlined in the project update report. KPMG will employ its resources as well as the early train operator and authority staff and consultants to produce the independent assessment and report. The report includes many of the elements that were discussed here at the board: a summary of the business case and findings, overview of the program, guiding principles and methodologies used by KPMG in the study, will summarize the business model for interim service and evolution into the full valley-to-valley service. It will also summarize the operational characteristics of the project, including ridership, revenues, and operating costs. We'll summarize and analyze the funding and costs and summarize the results of the economic impact analysis and other benefits. Also, there'll be a lengthy discussion on management or risk management relative to that segment. That report is expected to be completed in time for the September board meeting. Second report is what we call the Southern California Study and Comparative Analysis, which was requested by board member Camacho. The ETO, Deutsche Bahn, will lead a team for the development of a separate study of operations in the Southern California HSR corridor, provide that side-by-side comparison of the Peninsula, Central Valley, and Southern California sections. The ETO will coordinate with rail operators on these segments, the State Transportation Agency and Caltrans, and the study will be conducted in 2 phases: an interim report that will come forward at the September board meeting, and then a more full and final report that will be done in time to advise our 2020 business plan, which we'll be developing in the early part of 2020. Also at the September board meeting, it's going to be a busy meeting. It's scheduled to be in San Jose, and we will be bringing forward for the board's considerations the preferred alternatives for the Merced to San Jose segment and the San Jose to San Francisco segment. As we discussed at last month's board meeting, we released the staff recommendations for the state's preferred alternatives in these 2 Northern California sections of the system. Since releasing the recommendations, our regional staff, led by our regional director, Boris Lipkin, has been leading a comprehensive outreach effort to vet those recommendations with the communities along the route. Staff will bring the recommendations along with this feedback received during the outreach back to the board for direction at our September meeting. And again, we're scheduled to have that meeting in San Jose. This work that's going on in Northern California mirrors the work done in Southern California last fall when the board approved the preferred alternatives for the segment south of Bakersfield extending all the way to Anaheim, and it provides greater definition of the project and guides the staff's work on the environmental review analysis. So these are important steps, and I'm, just want to make sure the board's aware of what we're working on a day-to-day basis and the things we'll be coming forward to you with come September. Okay. And now the fun part of my presentation. Russ Fong, come on up. Do you guys remember Russ? Happy to have my voice back because I'm looking forward to embarrassing Russ. No, just kidding. No, I just wanted to acknowledge the work that Russ has done for this body as a chief financial officer over the last several years. I had the great opportunity to work directly with Russ when I was the Secretary of Transportation, and always trying to keep my eye on what was cooking over here. I always found Russ to be an exemplary public servant, an outstanding chief financial officer, and I was always very pleased with the work he did before I got here and certainly since I've been here. He did inform me that he was looking for a career change that would enable him to get back to his passion, which is coaching basketball. And I'm a basketball fan myself, and I appreciate that effort. I told Russ, if you want to win games, just put Kelly back in, and you have no problem. And showing what a great coach he is, he politely ignored that suggestion and moved on. But look, I just wanted to, again, have the opportunity to thank Russ for his commitment to this project, his excellent service to the state of California, and I'm pleased that that service will continue in the public forum still as he moves on to the housing community development entity and help solve the state's housing crisis. So no shortage of things to work on, but Russ, I just want to thank you for all the work and really tell you how much I appreciate our friendship. Thank you.
Thank you. I promise my presentation will be shorter than Frank's. I wanted to thank, first of all, the board for your leadership and the ton of hours you put in over the last 6 years. Your commitment is second to none. I do want to call out Mike Rossi and Tom Richards. Through the Finance and Audit Committee, I became a better CFO, and I thank you for that. To Brian and the entire team, I, for one, know how difficult and challenging this project is, and I will tell each and every one of you here that the staff works very hard, very, very hard, and they're very committed, and I just wish the staff the best of luck. And finally, to my financial office team, I wouldn't be standing here if it wasn't for them. So thank you very much, and I wish you the best of luck.
Of course, with that, he gets the ticket to ride for his great service to this organization. Thank you again, Russ.
It's a very expensive ticket.
Yes, yes.
The price keeps going up. We're going to try to cash it.
Mr. Chairman, I'll wrap up. I just want to make one other comment. Well, we couldn't get her up here today. I also want to recognize the departure and the fine work of Michelle Boehm, who worked well for us as our Southern California Regional Director for several years. And in my capacity here as the CEO, I was particularly impressed with the work she did to help ready the community and the board for the decisions that were made on the preferred alternatives in the Southern California area. That was very difficult work, and she coordinated that extraordinarily well, and I want to recognize her for that and tell you that that position is a very important position for this organization, and we are in the interview process now. I have meetings later this week with some potential candidates, and so we're looking to fill that. But again, Michelle did very good work for us, and I was certainly pleased to have her on our team. She's accepted a position with the City of Los Angeles in their transportation department, and I am certain that she will serve them well as she did here. So while she's not here with us today, I do want to recognize her fine work and her commitment to this project. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. And that concludes my CEO report.
Okay.
Sorry. Oh, it does not conclude my CEO report. There's one other thing that I do want to share with you. We are going to release a couple of things to the press and the public this week. One is we have some new video simulations of what project segments will look like that make it easier for the public to see the work we're doing and what the results of that work will be. And then second, we're also releasing, periodically we release a construction update. We have that video here as well that we'll be releasing to the public, I think tomorrow, if I'm not, is that right, tomorrow? Later today? Later today, we'll be releasing this. So this is just a brief video that reflects our construction update on the ground in the Central Valley.
The Central Valley is buzzing. With sounds of high-speed rail construction. From north of Madera to south of Wasco, signs of significant progress dot the 119-mile work zone. The Avenue 11 grade separation is all but ready for drivers, while final finishing touches, including the installation of guardrails, are being completed at Avenue 8. You can't miss the latest addition to the San Joaquin River Viaduct, Twin arches are taking shape there, soon to serve as the northern gateway into Fresno. Not nearly as visible, but just as impressive, construction of the box that will allow high-speed trains to pass below State Route 180. Crews are using an incredible 300 cubic yards of concrete for each section of wall. While some crews work under State Route 180, others are nearly ready to work over State Route 99. The Cedar Viaduct continues to stretch nearer to the highway, with work to cross over the top expected to start later this summer. Construction Package 1 is a hotbed of activity, with progress also being made at Road 27, Avenue 15, and Avenue 12. Literal signs of progress and preparation throughout Construction Package 2-3. These road closure signs signifying the opening of work at a series of locations in South Fresno County, including South and Conejo Avenues. Work is taking off closer to Hanford. Column work is underway at Excelsior Avenue in preparation for another concrete pour in the coming days. There are some 36 planned grade separation projects in CP23. Among those, Kent and Kansas Avenues well underway. And it's not just aerial construction in CP23. Crews are doing drainage work on the at-grade portions of the alignment. California Rail Builders is digging in Construction Package 4. Viaducts are under construction at multiple sites, including here at Garces Highway. The largest of those structures is rising from the ground south of Wasco. The Wasco Viaduct is actually two viaducts bookending a pergola that will allow high-speed trains to pass over the existing BNSF lines. There are currently more than a dozen active construction sites in the Central Valley, with the number of construction jobs created by high-speed rail construction closing in on 3,000. This significant progress being made in the Valley, further proof that high-speed rail is happening.
Great, thank you. And unless any board member has any questions or feels a need for an executive session, did we have an August meeting? Sorry, we'll do the finance up. No, I just wanted to do that before we do the finance update. The August meeting?
We do have one scheduled, but subject to conversation about whether you want to go on with that.
Right. And before we adjourn, Tom, would you do the last item on finance update? I know most of the members were at the finance committee. If you just want to do a short summary, that would be great.
I'll just do this real quickly. Finance and Audit met just before this meeting today. As the chairman said, most of you were there. Our focus has been for much of this year and today's meeting also our spend rate, which we discussed in varying reports. Unfortunately, I mean, as you know, our fiscal year ended on June the 30th. Our reporting is through May, but it looks like our spend rate versus our budget is probably about 50% of what the budget was for the previous year. So the implications of the job ahead of us with regards to delivery of the work necessary with the ARA grant by December 31st of 2022 is heavily on our minds, as it is on management and staff, and certainly the members of the committee. We now have a new report with regards to the new contingency summary that our new Chief Financial Officer has prepared, which gives us an opportunity to take a look at how contingency is being used. We did review that. Our vacancy rate in terms of employees is slightly up down from last month, up from last year. It's important to us because it also reflects on on the efficiency of what we do with regards to the needs in terms of the number of people to do the various jobs that the authority is responsible for. The operations report is presented by our Chief Operating Officer. We look at all items of operations, heavily again focused on construction activity and spend through the first half of this year. There have been a number of things that we've been told about that are being straightened out in the field, and we're expecting, based upon the reporting from our Chief Operating Officer, a substantial increase in activity in construction, which is what we're going to be very focused on again next year and the years after until, well, always, but certainly to ensure that we comply with the requirements under the ARA grant with the federal government. That was the $2.55 billion that we have already spent. I'm happy to report there's been, I think we would all agree, substantial improvement in our environmental processes in 19 to date, as well as real progress in third party. Both of those areas had been of real concern to us in previous years. So we continue being concerned about a number of things, but we certainly see improvement, but the spend is massively on our minds right now, and our hope is in future meetings this year we're going to be able to report out the substantial improvement in the monthly spend, especially in construction.
Okay, thank you. Unless there are any other items from any board members, we will look forward to hearing Nancy sign off to a pub in Dublin, and we'll communicate with everyone shortly about the August meeting, and if we don't see you before then, enjoy the rest of the summer. And we're not going to have a closed session today, and we will see you in September at the latest, and with that, the meeting's adjourned.